Hello to my online learners and welcome to chapter 15 where we talk about the lymphatic and the immune system. Now these systems are very complicated with a lot of parts, but we're just going to go over them very surface, on a very surface level, so this way you get the basics that you can build on at a later time. These diseases are mainly your defense system. So when you look at it, introduction, the immune and lymphatic systems work together to protect your body from pathogens, which is a disease-causing organism that produce disease. Without these systems, you won't survive long because these ones are naturally working without you even thinking about it. A lot of terminology here. Just want to go over some basic ones for you. So we have histamine, which you may have taken antihistamines, which help get rid of the snuffiness. Histamine is a chemical that is released in order to increase the leakiness of your vessels. So this way fluid can go and blood cells can go to fight infections. Interferon is a chemical that interferes, not to be confused with interleukin. When we look at leukin, that's got the word white in it, so interleukin is used to communicate between white cells. Lymph nodes are specialized structures where the lymph goes. Macrophages are specialized eaters. And we'll look at it. So if a group of pathogens enter your body, they must first get past the barriers. And the barriers are what is seen as your first line of defense. This is intact skin and secretion of your mucous membranes. So if the pathogen does not get into your body, if the pathogen does get in, it is recognized as not belonging. And that will then stimulate a whole set of responses to neutralize the pathogens, because our bodies have a response to determine the difference between self cells and non-self. So there are weapons that include specialized cells and specialized chemicals, and this will also stimulate an inflammatory response and a cleanup response. So the lymphatic system is both a transport system and also the barracks of the immune system, and it works very closely with the cardiovascular system. So here is a diagram. The red is the oxygenated, the blue is the deoxygenated, and the green is the lymphatic tissues. Here you'll see that lymphatic tissues are one-way or blind-ended fingers. So the capillaries, the blood comes in, it has a pathway to go out. With the lymphatic tissue, the fluid just goes in. It doesn't go out. So when we're looking at it, the functions of the lymphatic system is to recycle fluids lost by the cardiovascular system, transport pathogens to the lymph nodes where they're destroyed, to store and develop white tissues called lymphocytes, and also to absorb glycerin and fatty acids from foods and transfer them throughout your body. We'll talk a little bit more about this last function when we talk about the digestive system. So in your lymphatic system, you have lymph capillaries, which are quite similar to blood capillaries in the fact, except that they are dead-ended, and they're a little more permeable than the walls of your capillaries, but they only allow things in, they don't allow things out. Then you have your lymphatic tissue, your lymphatic fluid, which is a fluid that fills the capillaries. And it's all conducted with the lymph vessels, which are similar to veins because they have valves. They're also similar to veins in the fact that your smooth muscle is what helps propel the lymph through the system. So when you look at, where's the picture of the lymph vessels? Wrong textbook. Okay. So the large vessels will enter into the lymph nodes, and the lymph nodes are usually when you've got swollen glands, they're swollen nodes. And many lymph vessels will enter into a node, and then the node will filter the fluid that passes through it. Lymph nodes are small and they're encapsulated in the fact that they have a good capsule around them. So if you look at it here, very capsulated, easy to take out if there's any disease in it. The lymph nodes will filter and destroy pathogens using white blood cells called lymphocytes. So the lymph nodes are concentrated in your cervical, your neck, your armpit, your inguinal, your pelvic, your abdominal area. Your tonsils and your adenoids, your spleen and your thymus are also lymphatic tissue. I want you to be aware of what a lymph node looks like. I won't quiz you on it, but realize there's a capsule around it. There's many vessels coming in and usually only one going out. And there's a very good blood supply to it. The lymph vessels will then empty into what's called a lymph trunk. And these lymph trunks are very large and they will empty into collecting ducts. So let's look at the picture here. Here's your lymph vessels and they will collect and then dump directly into your subclavian vein. So on the right side, the right arm and the right part of your head will dump into the right thoracic duct. And then the rest of your body goes into what's called the right lymphatic duct. And on the left side, it is the thoracic duct. Here, notice that there's a good concentration of lymph nodes. You have your tonsils. Here is your spleen, which is a single organ, kind of back behind your guts. You have your thymus gland. And bone marrow is often included in this category because bone marrow is where your white blood cells are made. Okay, so we talked about the lymphatic duct. Good. The spleen is a spongy organ in the left quadrant of your abdomen, and it's similar to a lymph node, but the spleen will filter blood where lymph nodes filter lymph. It is surrounded by blood sinuses. So it is a site where red blood cells are cleaned up, and also it is a site where there's lymphocytes. The spleen's job is to function to remove and destroy old and fragile red blood cells, and it will also filter some pathogens from the bloodstream. It doesn't say here, but the spleen is also used in sort of an extra organ to store blood in case you deep sea dive. The spleen can be removed surgically. It will compromise your immunity, but the liver will take over the function. Then we talked about the thymus gland. The thymus gland, anything that's got a T in it in terms of T cells, T helper cells, the thymus gland is where the cells go to be what's called educated and matured. So white blood cells are made in your bone marrow, but then they migrate, some of them migrate to your thymus to get an extra job. A little bit about cancer. The lymphatic system will pick up any cancer. So, and sadly, once the cancer gets to your lymphatic system in stage 3, it will then spread. Okay. Just so you're aware, stage 1, it doesn't spread. 2, it spreads to tissue. 3, it's in your lymph nodes. And 4, it's placed in other organs, and then it's terminal. The immune system provides weapons to protect your body from invaders, and these consist of cells, such as T cells and B cells, chemicals, and barriers. So let's first start by a terminology. An antigen is a marker on the outside surface that identifies the bad guy. Every antigen in your body has a marker to prove that it is part of you or self. In a well-functioning body, your immune system will ignore yourself and only attack non-self antigens. If you do have a problem with an autoimmune disease, your body will start to attack yourself. a little complicated here, but this is basically a macrophage that comes, eats, takes in the bad guy, and it presents part of the bad guy, the antigen, on the back and on the outside of the cell, and that just helps it with determining or presenting what the bad guy is. The antigens will specifically be destroyed by specifically made antibodies, and the antibodies will bind to the antigens and mark them for white blood cells to clean them up. When we look at immunity, there's two types of immunity. There's one called innate, which you are born with or you develop, and another one called acquired, where you pick it up with age. So innate immunity is the front line against invasion, and it is what you were born with, and it prevents infection. So innate immunity can also be adaptive. Innate is one, and it's contrasted with adaptive. Adaptive immunity is something with a specific invader comes in, and it will set up your T cells and your B cells to specifically leave a memory. So if this comes back again, you can know it and get it. Okay, there's three parts to your immune system. The first one is called physical barriers. And physical barriers basically are stuff that prevent infection from even coming into your body. So this is your skin. And if you think of every opening in your body has some fluid coming out of it. So you've got tears in your eyes, you've got wax in your ears. Your urine is acidic to help destroy pathogens. So the whole idea is to not let anything get in. Then, if it does get in, you have white blood cells and different chemicals which will destroy and fight these infections. Your leukocytes are responsible for defending your body against infections. You have white blood cells that we talked about are in your bone marrow. They will then go to your thymus to mature. All sorts of information on your white blood cells. I just want you to know that you have white blood cells. We'll talk more in detail in another class. Neutrophils are specialized white blood cells that will ingest pathogens and cellular debris. And they are the first ones to go and clean up the site. And then after that are larger ones called macrophages. And macrophages will then leave the bloodstream, go through the blood vessels, and go into an area to continue with the cleanup. And then when you have too much of them, you get pus. All sorts of different information on basophils, eosinophils, dendritic cells. What I want you to pay attention to is a natural killer cell, which is a cell that floats around in your system and will wipe out anything that is not marked with your self marker. So this is, they release chemicals that destroy anything foreign. And so this is the one that if you have some sort of transplant and your transplant gets rejected, it's because of the natural killer cells. We talked about T cells just briefly. You've got cytotoxic T cells, helper T cells, regulated T cells. They're very complicated, and they're specifically made once the antigen gets into your body and is specifically identified. And it's identified by a helper T cell. It coordinates it, produces killer Ts or cytotoxic, which kill them. Then memory Ts will stick around for memory in case you have it again. Okay, there are chemicals to look at to help you in your first line of defense. One is interferon. Interferon interferes with viruses reproducing. Then there's an interleukin, and there's many different types of interleukins. I just want you to realize it is a chemical between white blood cells. Okay, let's stop at inflammation and go to part 2, just because this video is almost 15 minutes. So stay tuned for part 2.